Good morning and good evening, wherever you are. My name is Dearbhail Ormond and I'm the founder of Frendo. I'm joining from London and we have Kylie Bucich and Neil O'Sullivan, both over in Australia. Really excited about this because my own personal journey, has a lot of experience in both of these areas. And I'm all for that endo to empowered conversation. So yes, it's a really crappy condition to have, but always looking at kind of root cause and trying to find ways to live with it better. My own story is that I probably lived for about 18 to 20 years with undiagnosed endometriosis. I am Irish, but I lived in Australia for quite a long time and was finally diagnosed in Australia. So it holds a warm place in my heart for many reasons. I was misdiagnosed with everything you can think of, really, chronic fatigue, celiac, irritable bowel. And I suppose the reason for that is like because the symptoms often started within the gut, within the abdominal area, pain in my abdomen. And it really was, I'd say it stole a lot of my 20s because I lost a lot of trust in my body and in myself because of, feeling dismissed when you know something is wrong with your body and you're not really being validated by doctors. So that's kind of a long time ago now for me, and I've learned and I've focused on a lot of ways to try and deal with the endometriosis. And a lot of these involve dietary, nutrition, and in particular sauna. So I'm really excited to discuss and hear and learn tonight, and focusing on this full body approach, really. So I'm going to hand you over to Kylie now, who's a women's health nutritionist. And I think you have a particular interest and a speciality in endometriosis, but also I think perimenopause as well, which is really relevant. And there's a lot of crossover as well. Kylie, welcome.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Devil, for inviting me to be here. So, as Devil said, I'm a women's health nutritionist. I've been working with women for about 12 years. And today, I really just want to share with you some really practical tips that you can actually go out and implement straight away to really support you on your journey with endometriosis. And I could literally talk about this for hours. So for me to condense this into about 20 minutes is actually going to be a challenge. So I'm going to really work through things quite quickly. As you all know, every single woman is going to present with a different range of symptoms. So this is general information, and I really recommend that if you have really specific needs, concerns, that you reach out to your healthcare providers. And we're going to chat a little bit more about, where to find people, how to find them, and all that kind of thing as well at the end. So, as we know, endometriosis is a complex whole body condition. As Joel said, it can affect so many different body systems. And when it comes to supporting yourself, it's not just about what you put on your plate. What you put on your plate is unbelievably important. It's either going to be pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. Whatever we eat is actually information to our bodies and our cells, and we need to be able to fuel our body with like the best possible sources of food. But it's all about your lifestyle as well. It is about getting quality sleep. It's about your toxic load. So really looking at, doing a clean beauty edit, looking at the products that you were cleaning your home with. And in the Nimbus locations, they have the most beautiful, clean products that is such, go to their shop. That is the best place to start if you want to start doing a bit of an edit on that. Moving your body, managing your stress levels, and self-care. This is again that whole body approach. It's not just one thing. Research suggests that diet plays an absolutely important and key role in treatment management and even the prevention of endometriosis. And I really hope that this feels hopeful to you, because I know a lot of women with endo feel really helpless and hopeless and unheard But what I'm talking to you about tonight are things that you are actually in control of, which kind of feels that feels good. Okay, so let's jump in. So how can a nutritionist actually support you? Because we've got our GP, we've got our specialist, we might have a women's health physio for pelvic pain and that kind of thing. But how could someone like me actually help you? So we look at reducing inflammation in the body. We're going to look at supporting estrogen clearance via the liver and the gut. We're going to improve your gut health. We are going to balance your blood sugar to help stabilize your energy, your mood, and your hormones. We are going to support your mitochondrial health, which are those little energy centers that are in your cell. That's going to help to reduce fatigue. And then we're going to look at addressing any nutrient deficiencies, which are common in endometriosis as well. So some of those nutrient deficiencies are going to be iron due to heavy period, magnesium, zinc, B6, vitamin D, and omega-3s. And these are often due to inflammation, heavy period, gut issues, and also dietary restrictions too. If you're playing around with diet, what's making you feel good, and that can lead to deficiencies also. Now, there are a number of really great, well-researched diets for endometriosis. However, there is not one particular endo diet. And you may have found that yourself, Dearbhail. You may have dabbled with a little bit of this, a little bit of that, trying to, find what works best for you. Tonight, we're just going to be speaking about an anti-inflammatory diet. But there's also the Mediterranean diet. There's low FODMAP if you are experiencing a lot of gut issues. And there's also a low histamine diet if you're experiencing, symptoms like getting rashes, allergies. There can be a lot of symptoms with histamine, but that is a really big thing for women with endometriosis as well. And there's actually also a nickel-free diet. So if any of you wear nickel earrings, which I don't know who does, but nickel jewelry can actually have a reaction to that. You might be sensitive to nickel as well. So as you can see there, it's quite complex. And in 20 minutes, it's really, really hard to dig deep into any particular thing. But just know that working with a health professional can really help to just narrow down those options for you without sort of flailing around and wondering, oh my gosh, where do I start? Let's just have a look what an anti-inflammatory diet would look like roughly. I am a big believer, and, this is the way I live myself, in a whole food diet. So for me, that is just trying to eat as many food close to nature as possible. So as many foods that are not in pictures, really. So when we're looking at this anti-inflammatory diet, we're going to be looking at protein, eggs, chicken, legumes, organic red meat, oily fish, which is where we're going to get our omega-3s from, that wild salmon, sardine, mackerel. And we're going to look at aiming at about 25 to 30 grams of protein with each meal. Now, protein actually helps to support tissue repair, hormone production, blood sugar regulation, which is essential for inflammation, and also those blood sugar crashes. I know Dearbhail actually talked about blood sugar, how regulating the blood sugar levels actually really helped reduce your flares. You talked about that on Instagram this week, which is, which is, and this is something that you are completely in control of because,
I think. No, I was just going to jump in and say, I mean, I went through so many of those just trying to figure out what worked and didn't work, gluten-free, dairy-free, all of that stuff. But really what affects me and my flares is sugar.
Yeah. And that's something that I really, really work with in my practice every single day is blood sugar regulation, because not only is it just about blood sugar and energy, the long-term impact of having dysregulated blood sugar leads to quite serious health conditions down the track that aren't necessarily related to endometriosis, but, high blood pressure, cardiovascular risk, fatty liver disease, all these types of things. It's quite, it's really, really important to work on this. Making sure that you're getting a beautiful array of vegetables. Ideally, if you can get, seasonal vegetables as well. Like here right now in the Southern Hemisphere, we've got a lot of beautiful brassicas and leafy green. Your brassicas are going to be beautiful to support your and cruciferous vegetables to support that liver detoxification, estrogen clearance. So broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprout, all those beautiful things. And then in the Northern Hemisphere, you've got, all the rest of the foods, which are absolutely beautiful. So right now there's a huge huge array of food that you can be eating over in the Northern Hemisphere. Vegetables are going to be rich in antioxidants and compounds that support, like I said, that clearance of estrogen and easing those hormonal symptoms. We need to look at getting enough healthy fats in our diet as well. So olive oil, nuts and seeds, and also avocado. You might use our coconut oil, those types of things. That is going to be essential for anti-inflammatory support, but also to support your nervous system too. Another one is fiber. So this is where we get our fiber from our vegetables. So again, really looking at our plate and designing it in a way that is going to fuel your body, your nervous system, regulate your blood sugar balance, and give you enough fiber so that, again, you're having, regular bowel movement and you're actually able to clear that excess estrogen that is in the body. So what foods do we reduce? We're going to be looking at potentially reducing gluten and dairy. I know you said you tried that, so well, these can be quite major for some women. Ultra processed foods, that is going to be huge. And I know the average Australian diet consists of about 60% ultra processed food. We need to really, really look at reducing anything out of a package. It is going to produce inflammation in the body. And we just don't, a woman with endometriosis doesn't need to be dealing with more than what she already is. Refined sugars, absolutely. And then histamine foods as well. Did you find you were affected by histamine foods? So that's things like aged cheese, wine, leftovers.
It's so funny because I'm taking notes here, and it's one of the things I was going to talk about later.
Yeah.
Actually, I would love to know a little bit more about that. And we don't get a lot, I wouldn't say there's a lot in our Frendo community around histamine foods, but interestingly, like the interesting thing about endo is it really can change throughout your life. My symptoms now are really different to the ones I would have had in my 20s. And I had a hysterectomy about, a year and a half ago, just to try, because I had adenomyosis as well. And what I noticed, I still have one ovary, so it's kind of dipping into perimenopause now, and I'm trying to figure out what's giving me migraines. That I had migraines back when I was really quite young, and that would one of the big symptoms for me. But then they went away, and now they're back. And so what I've been looking at are those histamine, like different types of grapes, of wines, and I mean, I'm a big cheese fan. So, but I think that's a really interesting, and it's not as talked about, certainly over here in the UK.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you do hit the perimenopausal years. So I know this is a bit of a segue here, but it is considered a second puberty. So what women find is that the symptoms that you may have experienced as your cycle was establishing, so like in your teens, early 20s, where you're getting migraine, they come back again in perimenopause.
Wow, it's just a joy. All right.
Just with like endo under control.
I know.
Well, hits you. And it's, that high fluctuating estrogen that is a roller coaster, which happens in puberty and then starts to happen in peri as well. So that's what you're starting to see there. So you might have those trigger foods. I'll be sure to send you a high histamine foods handout. And and then the high fluctuating estrogen and then the lowering progesterone. And here come your migraines again. But there are some really good tools and really good nutrients for migraines, which perhaps we can have a talk about this, endo and peri or something like that at another time.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think it's unfortunately, it's a big thing for people who suffer from endo, and whether it's like chemically induced. So just, quickly, I don't know how many people here are actually diagnosed and being treated, but I want to also say that, it's recognized that a hysterectomy doesn't necessarily cure endo. However, my surgeon did say to me before, look, I do think it will mitigate a lot of your symptoms of endo as well. And it has. But who knows if they were actually adenomyosis symptoms. But also, a lot of endo sufferers will be medically induced into medical menopause for a period of time. That might be before they're trying for a baby or before surgery. So I think all of these, I do think there is a big overlap actually with menopause and particularly in actually in the symptoms and the stigma and yeah, and the mental health as well,
Mm.
yeah, of both of the conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much, there's a lot of talk about it here in Australia. And it's, I'm sure in the UK as well. And it's
Mm.
really brilliant that women's health is really being highlighted now. So we're really, really fortunate that we're, in the spotlight, I feel, and getting some recognition, and not recognition, but the attention that it actually deserves. Because, every single woman in the world is going to go through menopause. There's no escaping it. Okay. So another really interesting thing, and I'm not sure how many of you on here, this is just something I came across during my research for this talk, this isn't about food, this is more lifestyle based, is about the really intricate relationship between your circadian rhythm and endometriosis. So I'm going to read a little bit of this, but basically, your circadian rhythm is your body's internal clock. And now disruption to that circadian rhythm may contribute to the development and severity of endometriosis. It alters hormonal secretion, increasing systemic inflammation and impaired immune function. So this is the modern world that we live in. We are under blue lights. We are in front of blue screens. We do not get enough natural light. We spend 90% of our time indoors. We have completely disconnected from the natural world, which we are a part of. And it was saying here that this dysregulation to melatonin and cortisol, which both of these play a key role in modulating inflammation, estrogen balance, and pain reception. So basically, when we have circadian misalignment, it may actually contribute to inflammation, estrogen dominance, and it's quite fascinating, I think. Were you aware of that, Daryl? The relationship between
No, I can't. Oh gosh, echo. I can't. I mean, I would say natural light is hugely important for me, and just in general, and also in my, I suppose what I call is slow hacks. I'm not trying to biohack, but they're just simple things that I've been trying to do over the last year that make me much more conscious and present. And the first thing I do in the morning is I have to, when we have light in the
yeah,
UK, I have to walk out, or not have to, I just want to. I walk out into the garden, lucky that we have garden, and just get myself some light. And I also feel, yeah, when I'm working all day indoors, I just feel rubbish,
yeah.
But I wouldn't say, again, it's just another area that I'd love to learn more about.
There's a woman I'm following that talks about this specifically, and she's in Canada. And I just thought, gosh, this is just, I think, yeah, like just our modern living and what it's actually doing to our cells, our pain receptors, inflammation in the body, all that kind of things. It's really, really fascinating. So ways that we can simply support this is morning light. As soon as you wake up in the morning, you are not going to open up your phone. You are going to go straight outside and you are going to get some morning light into your eyes. Ideally, you would be also earthing. So that is just getting your bare feet onto the ground and soaking up all that beautiful energy that the earth gives us. Having consistent sleep and wake times, reducing blue light at night. So if you're on your, like typically I wear like blue light blockers. I have amber lights in all of my lamps in the house. Eating meals at a regular time. Like our body loves rhythm. Our body loves rhythm, and we need to get back into the rhythm of nature. So we've talked a little bit about blood sugar as well. So ideally 25 to 30 grams of protein per meal. And what you find is that your blood sugar really stabilizes like this. And you find that you have less cravings, your energy is not all over the place, you're not sort of wanting as much sugar. This is something that I work on really deeply with my clients. And it is profound how much this changes somebody's energy in somebody's day. And within the first day, like this is something you can go out and start working towards tomorrow morning or tonight, depending where you're located. I'm going to wrap up. I do want to just let you know I have a program called the 7-Day Body Reset. And that is just a catchy name. This is actually a lifestyle program. This is not anything that is fad or quick fix. This is about creating a beautiful lifestyle that works for you and your health within your reality of your world. So if you're super busy, you can still make this work. And it's all about just nourishing your body with real food, optimizing your sleep and your circadian rhythm, incorporating and weaving in self-care, changing your relationship with stress, and a little bit about movement. And every month I jump online and get together with my community and we reset, because we know that stress happens, illness happens, life happens, fall off the bandwagon. This is the way you can actually jump on. And it's just a digital download that you can get. So I'll be jumping in and just popping all these things in the chat. And any questions, you can just connect with me on Instagram. I'll pop everything there, or go to my website. But thank you. I want to jump over to Neil because I know you've got so much amazing information.
Thank you so much, Kylie. Oh my gosh, yeah, we could do another 3 hours on that, I think. Really, yeah, there's so much food for thought, literally. Excuse the pun there. But now, yeah, I'm super excited to bring in Neil, who's the founder of Nimbus. I don't know if you've come across Nimbus before. Actually, Neil, to be honest, when I shared it out to my personal network, 2 people came back from going, yeah, I love these guys. And they're leading the way in making sauna therapy much more accessible and supportive for, I suppose, for real people, not just athletes. And for me, it's been a consistent support for me in my life and in my therapy. I just wish I had one in my house. So that's yet to come, Neil. So I'll hand it over to you now, and Neil's going to share some tips around regulating the nervous system and inflammation. And yeah, excited. Thanks, Neil.
Well, for $9.99, you can get a I'll keep the sound that out, but that's not much for the intro there. And yeah, fascinating for me, and very conscious of being a male on this call. But I think a big part of endometriosis, particularly in my own circle, is, well, also how shocked I was in the last few years to realize how many of my friends in close circle are impacted by it. And you guys are right. Like, you don't hear, particularly from the other side, let's say being a man or a different gender, how impactful it actually is to people's lives. It's really crazy. And as I was listening to you, Kylie, and Dearbhail speak about it, it's funny because I have a condition called MTHFR. So inflammation is a big issue for me personally as well. And almost everything that you guys have said applies directly to my own case as well. And it's crippling for me in terms of inflammation, and it comes down to diet. And if I have flares as well in terms of candida, if I'm eating fried foods and sugars and things like that. And we're over in Bali at the moment, hence why I'm wearing a tank top, which I didn't realize leaving the house this morning was probably not appropriate for a podcast. But yeah, it's funny when you get out of your immediate environment where you have structure. I'm starting to get little things like spots on my arm and things like that, which I never have, and because I haven't been doing the sauna as much. So yeah, and like, I'm not supposed to have gluten and dairy and processed food. Wine makes me go off as well. Poke bowls are another thing. And I actually had a question, maybe you can answer at the end, Kylie, around, is there a link between endo and autoimmune conditions? Because with what I have, it certainly has an impact with me from an autoimmune. So yeah, I was just fascinated to hear how relatable it was actually, even to let's say me as a guy. But okay, I'll dive into saunas. Now, the first thing, I am a bit fancy here. I've got a presentation, but I'm not going to read it verbatim. But what I am going to do is just have it there so you guys can see while I'm chatting. So can you spot the business owner with multiple tabs as well?
Yeah.
I think everyone
I'm the exact same. Founders, I think, are like that. Neil, just before you go ahead, sorry, I missed what the condition is that you suffer from.
Yeah, so I was largely undiagnosed. I lived in Ireland for 26 years before I left for Australia. Got to Australia, met my beautiful wife Sue, and she's a nutritionist as well, and would love to have her on these things, but she hates the limelight. So I get pushed out into the light, whether I like it or not. But when we first started dating, she said to me, like, all your symptoms and stuff, which was things like, sorry, it's a bit crass, but like farting and waking up tired all the time and sluggish and wondering what's going on. I struggled to put on weight. I started to get these autoimmune conditions. This is actually alopecia areata in my beard. And she said, like, this isn't right. So I went and got all these tests, and I came back with this condition called MTHFR, which is a genetic defect, essentially, that my body, like 1/3 of a population doesn't have this at all. One other third has one strain from mom or dad, and then the final third has it from both, which is what I have. And you have a 70% loss of function in methylation, which is the breakdown and absorptions of folic acid, or more specifically, vitamin B12. So my body struggles to absorb and detoxify compared to the next person. So saunas and the knock-on effects are inflammation, autoimmune, mental health, which I struggle with. So, and then cardiovascular disease is another one in terms of long-term. So it's virtually the same kind of protocol in terms of
Yeah.
I need to keep things out of my body that are going to make it harder for my body to do its normal bodily functions, essentially.
Yeah. Wow. I think, I think also we could do another session on all of this, because I think when we look at like the root and all of these symptoms, they're so similar. And I think there is another piece around this. You mentioned mitochondrial health, Kylie, and yeah, there's a big thing with people with endo, and there is not enough research around it yet in terms of how we, like, you go get your bloods, everything comes back fine, but actually, are we looking at the cells? Like, are we looking at, are these nutrients actually getting to the right place? And I think that's it's a huge area that is only really being discovered now. And it's a big thing for people living with chronic illness and inflammation.
There's a link in my research with MTHFR and Endo as well.
Interesting. Okay.
And in fact, like with the diet, it's funny, it doesn't matter. Like I could be talking about anything right now and all back to the same diet, pretty much, as a base rule, like very general. It's like it's quite standard. Like we just have to take out the garbage.
Yep.
And real food.
Single ingredient. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say the same thing, like whether it's procreation or IVF, things like that, it's the same kind of thing, like we support people sometimes in the background with things outside of saunas. We have amazing practitioners that work in our studio. So I've kind of learned so much. And even my own best friend was struggling, they went through all these rounds of IVF, and then Sue and our team gave him like a protocol to follow for minimum 3 months, ideally 6 months. He went off for 4 months, came back. And this was just like lifestyle changes. Like it's nothing, out of your cleaner diet, magnesium and things that you mentioned later on. And then they found that they've had 2 kids naturally since then. And which like really is a bare bug with IVF. It's like, people go there and then the service providers aren't giving those couples the best opportunity of success, like by just getting the ground rules right, and I just did a 90-day reset myself on the 1st of January because I'm human as well, and we try and promote a real message with Nimbus, and people think I do saunas all the time. I don't, I eat burgers, I drink, you do these things. And I did a 90-day reset and lost 9 kilos in the first month, and I couldn't believe the impact it made. And it was just things like cutting out caffeine, dairy, no alcohol, sticking to whole foods, minimal supplements, all natural, and yeah, it made a profound impact to me in the space of 90 days. So yeah, it can be applied to multiple things. But the first thing I would say off the bat from a sauna perspective, and I feel like I say this a lot these days, is saunas aren't the answer. And I'm not going to sit here and say saunas will cure your endometriosis, but what they can be is a complementary, non-invasive therapy. There's so much science coming out, and like it's not a new thing either. Infrared has been around since about the 70s through the Japanese in terms of making it an accessible health modality, and millennia ago in terms of traditional Finnish saunas. So they've been around for a long time. So whilst it's kind of hot right now, excuse the pun, and every man and his dog and woman has a sauna or goes to a sauna, which is great, and you see them in massage parlors now and salons and everything. It's great in that sense, but hopefully what I'll get to here a little bit is like it's not just all about the sauna, but what it can do is speed up that pain relief, anti-inflammation, improved mood and mental health, which I'll dive into. And I hope you guys can see my presentation here. Can you?
Yeah, we can. It looks great.
So there's a couple of areas I'm going to dive into. First is like pain relief. So I also was a semi-professional soccer player, so like sports was a big thing for me, and saunas just help from a pain relief perspective so much. So why or how do they do that? Well, they increase the blood flow. So there's a term called facilitation, which is like the expansion, and then the ice bath contracts your blood vessels. So imagine your blood vessels expanding and contracting. So it stimulates that blood flow circulation, which helps that reduction of inflammation and also cramping, which can be, commonly associated with endo. And heat therapy as itself is very well documented in terms of that pain relief. And saunas are obviously a great way of doing that, whether it's an infrared or a steam sauna. It relaxes muscles, stiffness, things like that, especially for lower back. Hip pain is really, really good if that's something that you struggle with, which again can be associated with endo. And if you think about the hot water bottle, which I know some of my friends use, because they, that's often referenced as a really great thing, especially when you're going to bed, which is true. But the thing about the hot water bottle is that it's localized to an area. Whereas if you think about from a sauna perspective, and you mentioned cellular growth, the great thing about what an infrared sauna does, it's a light, so it penetrates your body at a cellular level. So a traditional sauna heats the air heats you, and you heat up that way. Whereas infrared penetrates you right in on a cellular level. So what happens is, if you imagine my fist as a cell, they kind of shake and rock and open because they weaken because you put it through an exercise mode. Then what happens afterwards is that they heal, but they heal stronger. You actually generate new cells, heat shock proteins, they call them. Now, I'm 40, when you turn 40, you start losing the ability to regenerate cells. So infrared sauna is actually a really great way to actually promote new cellular growth. So that, and it's not isolated to the one area. So if you imagine again, like going to the gym, you rip a muscle, it repairs, it fixes that muscle. Whereas an infrared sauna does that cellular regrowth everywhere. So that's why it just has that increased impact in terms of anti-inflammation, muscle recovery, blood flow, and things like that. Now, in terms of inflammation, again, it's a big part of endometriosis, and there's so much studies now that are coming out about these markers. So the reduction of CRP, which is C-reactive protein. So whilst it increases the kind of blood shock or heat shock proteins, which are good regenerative longevity cells, what it also does, it removes markers in terms of the negative cells that you want to get out of. So when it comes to inflammation and chronic illnesses, we get a lot of like bad cells. And what happens is they hang around your body in different shapes and form. What a sauna does is it helps flush out all those bad cells. And you'll notice sometimes when you have a sauna, particularly if you're in a phase where you need it more than other times, you'll start to see these black little dots on your towel. It's a bit gross, I know. But if you're sitting there, either where your bum is or where your feet are, after your sauna, you'll see black dots. If you see that, that's normally a sign that you're like, you need to get in and do this a little bit more, or you're maybe in a kind of a heavy, intoxicated, not from an alcohol perspective, but in terms of heavy metals and things like that at the time. So I get it every now and again if I haven't been doing regular saunas. I'll notice, okay, I've got loads of black dots. There's a lot of heavy metals in my body. So it's a really good way then to obviously flush all that out of your body and help your tissues heal. Now, when it comes to toxins, people get staggered by this statistic, but in a given day, we come in touch with 600,000 toxins. Everything from what you touch, Kylie mentioned about clean products. The minute we wake up, from touching our partners to bed sheets to shampoos, toothbrushes, foods, touching a bus, getting in the car, like all those kind of things that's happened to us all the time. And that's increasing exponentially in today's society. Now, what a sauna does, it helps speed up that process. So sweating is the best way to kind of offload those toxins, including the xenoestrogens and endocrine disruptors, which we come into touch a lot. Like we try and live 99% natural as much as we can. We're not perfect beings, of course, but like perfume is a really good example that I always use. So I used to be dab everywhere, all over my body for my whole life. And those disruptors, when you remove them, and this is like a little test you can do, if you remove all those kind of high street perfumes out of your, let's say, closet, and bring in a natural one, what you'll realize then, if you ever go back and spray Chanel or something maybe back on you, normally what happens is you'll immediately get a headache, You can get like heated skin. Your eyes can swell up, and that's a big thing that you go, well, I was just going through my everyday spraying on my clothes and my skin every single day. And you wouldn't have noticed it if you use it regularly. But when you remove it and introduce it back in, that's when you get a real shock of like, wow, this is what's actually disrupting me. And if that's happening to you every single day and you're on autopilot, that's going to impact your endometriosis a little bit more. It's going to upset our hormones, etc. So yes, it is a complementary service that goes with, that kind of inflammation and pain relief. Now, the other thing is, when it comes to immune dysfunction, which again is relatable to endo, if you can't clear your immune system and get rid of all those bad cells, as I mentioned, saunas are a really good way to help stimulate that kind of white blood cell activity and kind of regulate your immune system. So it's another level of support in that sense. And people often ask, like, oh, if I'm sick, should I have a sauna? People think when you're sick or when you had a flare, like to go in. Normally what we try and say is like, if you can do a sauna more preventatively, like if you're in the middle of a sickness and you're really feeling ill, it's probably not wise to do a sauna because your immune system is already low. And a sauna is still a form of exercise. Think about it like that. If you were in the middle of a really big flare of, or you're really ill, would you go for a jog or would you go and do a gym session or something like that? You probably wouldn't, right? So we constantly talk about saunas being more of a preventative thing rather than a reactory thing. So there's a huge research out of Denmark. There's an amazing PhD physicist called Dr. Susanna Soderberg, who's very worth the time and effort to read her stuff. And she speaks about how, roughly 2 saunas a week is the sweet spot, somewhere between 30 or 40 minutes. And you can slice that into smaller chunks if you like to support all that kind of level of immune and detoxification. So, you don't have to do it every single day, basically. The next area is mental health. I struggle with mental health as well. It's a big thing. And for someone who's struggling with endo, it doesn't just impact your well-being, or the body itself. It also impacts your own mental well-being from a sense of like you're under chronic pain, fatigue, maybe there's infertility stress as well. So you're carrying that huge load all the time. Now, what a sauna does is, especially if you do it in a studio, any kind of studio, is you go into I say you go into a box, like a studio, you go into a room, which is another box. Then you go into the sauna itself, is another box. So it's kind of 3 layers of removal from that stressful environment. And it's amazing. The number one thing that people say why they sauna is the feeling they get afterwards compared to before, which is, when you think about it, absolutely nothing to do with the medical benefits of it. It's non-tangible. You can't touch that. And we call that like the invisible benefit. So it's literally just giving you a place where you can just get away and escape from whatever it is that's going on in your life. And that in itself is also extremely powerful. Never mind skin health, immune boosting, and things like that as well. And as a result, then that reduces your stress levels. And cortisol is a big thing. And I struggle with cortisol. So you can get wearables and things like that to track cortisol levels. But if your cortisol levels are high, that's going to impact the inflammation and the hormone deregulation even more than when it's not. So keeping yourself in a low stress environment is hugely important for endo. And you can do this, of course, in multiple different ways, not just saunas, but trying to get your body into that rest and digest mode as often as you can is only going to help your symptoms and help how you can cope, obviously, with endo at large.
Neil, sorry, I'm just going to jump in here because that has been probably one of my biggest learnings over the years, is how my environment impacts, first of all, my cortisol levels, and then has an impact in potentially being a catalyst for a flare. And it's like I mentioned about sugar and this are the 2 biggest learnings I think I've had. And and that could be being in a stressful environment with work or with family, or it's really how I take that on, my system takes it on, then my cortisol levels spike, and there's an immediate response with pain for me and inflammation. And then so it's taken years to learn that I have to have very strong boundaries in, in with my environment, and keeping that as low stress as possible, because it has this real knock-on effect that could last for weeks for me. So yeah, just for me, that's been a massive learning. And that's why I know that this is such a systemic and inflammatory disease. So I think also it's so important for us to take our time to like understand our triggers with conditions and diseases, and be really strong about not letting others or not letting environments disrupt those. Because with things like endometriosis, it really can, it starts like small, but then flares can last for weeks, and really does affect your mental health as well, like you were saying.
Yeah, and it can compound, right? And it's debilitating, and you don't want to get out of bed, or you can't work,
Yeah.
or you feel like you just don't want to challenge the day. And then you do throw kids in on top of that, and family, and deadlines, and reports. You're like, you can just, it just starts to build up, and then it starts to get overwhelming. And if you can imagine, like, the depths of the ocean, right? Like, whether it's any kind of mindfulness, whether it's meditation, saunas, yoga, Pilates, and things like that. Imagine like if anyone's done Ayurvedic, they'll know what I'm talking about here. But if your ocean level is high, you're more likely to get those flares. And for me, it's things like candida, and I get, little things on my hands, and I get rough skin, and little splits and things like that. And I'll say to Sue, my wife, you should go, yeah, you're eating too much sugar and processed food at the moment. And I'll just go, okay, yeah, that actually makes sense. So if you're eating kind of healthy, your level of your ocean is going down. If you're being mindful, your level's going down a little bit more. So you're less likely then to have as much flare-ups or conditions in that period of time. And that also applies to mental health. And I have a podcast on this as well. And the number one thing, which I'm going to talk at the end here, is around sleep. And normally when someone's struggling from a mental health perspective, if you just ask a couple of questions, even less so about are you okay, but like what's actually going on with you at the moment, like 9 times out of 10, it's usually the same things. It's your sleep is poor, my diet is off, my stress levels are high. Those three things come up all the time. And when you start looking into it, because we're just plowing through life as much as we can, you can go, well, yeah, actually, I'm not getting the best sleep at the moment. I haven't been exercising as much as I have. My diet is a little bit off. And if you have all of those things happening all at once, that's when you're obviously going to be more likely in that kind of flare-up zone. And we do talk about this as well, like what makes a well-being. And there's physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. They're kind of 4 pillars we try to talk about. And the idea is to try and keep those pillars at 80%, as much as you can. But we're also human. I love chocolate. We all have our little things. It's not to say that you have to remove these entirely, but just can you have that balance to keep your ocean levels down, to keep those 4 pillars at about 80%, as often as you can. And that's where you'll see like really great impact. And, we mentioned about mental health and how you can sometimes be depleted, but also what a sauna does, it also increases the production of endorphins and dopamine, which then give you relief in terms of depression and anxiety. So not only are they kind of reducing your cortisol levels, they're also increasing the things that actually make you a happier being. And that protocol I mentioned through Dr. Susanna Soderbergh, if you do that, it doesn't just stop here with mental health. It goes on to all-cause mortality, so dementia, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, stroke. Like, it impacts all of those main diseases and conditions by up to 40%, depending on what it is. So yeah, it's certainly here to stay. It's not going anywhere, and the research just keeps coming out a lot more. Now, the last thing here I'm going to talk about is the sleep. So this is an amazing guy called Dean. He was based out of Adelaide, and he went over with the Australian Olympic team to basically manage their sleep patterns whilst at the Olympics. And I think I think the most successful Olympics Australia, I think, has ever had from a medal tally, or at least maybe top 2. And it seems so obvious, sleep. And like, I talk about this a lot when it comes to well-being. Yes, saunas are great. If you do them great, they're going to help you. But to be honest, most of the things that really make an impact for you are generally free, like it's like I'm not saying food is free, but you know what I mean? Your choices in that area don't necessarily have to be linked towards money. Breath work is another big thing, but sleep is the number one thing that usually falls first. So if you don't get the right amount of sleep, what happens, I think Kylie, you mentioned your circadian rhythm, that all gets out of whack. If that gets out of whack, then it has a snowball effect on your day, your week. And you mentioned, Dearbhail, in terms of like having flares over a weekly basis. So we talk about, well, what can you control? If you've had a flare up, what is in my control right now? And sleep is one of the best things that you can control. Now, obviously, there's a caveat with that. Like, people generally have issues with sleep and insomnia and so forth, of course. And, see the best advice you can get to try and overcome them. But saunas are another great thing to help sleep. Ice baths, coincidentally, also can help sleep. That ice baths, which I don't have in this presentation, and I can mention them maybe at the end. There's a whole other session on ice baths and cold therapy towards women, which is really undocumented in industry at the moment. There's the whole one size fits all, everybody jumps in, has an ice bath, it's going to make you better. That is not the case, and particularly for women, because women and men heat our bodies differently. So men can get warmth from their periphery quicker back to the essential, organs and heart and so forth, quicker than a woman can. So it's actually harder for a woman to do an ice bath, which you can slag your partners and friends about. Men have it a little bit easier in that sense. And if a woman goes into an ice bath at a certain temperature that's too cold, it actually starts having a negative impact on all those things that we mentioned already. So that's a huge issue that's not regulated at all. And there's so much more information. So just buyer beware with ice baths. They can be good for you, but for a woman, it doesn't need to be that cold. Anything around 15 degrees is going to give you the benefit of an ice bath. It doesn't need to be 4 degrees or 2 or 6 degrees. And you don't have to sit in there for 10 minutes, so just be aware of that. And we can have more chats about that later. But
yeah, I think that, sorry, Neil, I'm just going to jump in, and I'm conscious of time to get questions, but I just wanted to also, I love that point that you've just made, because I mean, I think it's so consistent with like what you were saying, Kylie. It's about time that, women's health is, at the forefront of discussions. But again, like, clinical trials didn't include women until, 1970s. And so a lot of these protocols or, systems are based around men. And that's such an important point. And what I try to always say is, you do what feels right for you. Even when you're talking about sleep there, women actually do. Kylie, you might know more than this, but we do need more sleep than men. And particularly, obviously, we're going to need more sleep in our luteal phase and, when we're in a pain flare. And I also just wanted to mention, for those possibly there living with pain and endo, I agree wholeheartedly that sleep is the key. It can be actually one of the biggest challenges for people with endometriosis, because you're living in pain and it's this cycle. So I think what we've spoken about here is, like, as you said, Niamh, it's preventative. If we can introduce infrared and, nourish our system as much as possible to prevent those flares that really affect our sleep and our mood, that is just crucial. So if there wasn't anything in particular there, will I jump across to Neil? This is just fascinating. I think we need a whole other session as well on this.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say on the breathing and breath work is a thing at the moment. I know, again, it's kind of like come in as this like fad, but like breath work is an amazing free tool that you can use. And if you even just think about it from a sleep perspective, like I use box breathing at night if you're particularly stressed. It's about 2 or 3 minutes. You can just do it at home. There's a lot going around your head, and it usually sends me off to sleep. But also nasal breathing, which the thing about nasal breathing and the link with sleep is, like, so when you sleep, if you're a mouth breather, which I was, you sleep with your mouth open, you drool. And what happens if you had a little microphone over your mouth? All you'd hear is, and what happens when you mouth breathe is that there's an there's a variance in how you're breathing in to breathing out, which gives you a disrupted sleep. Now, if you do nasal breathing, and there's research on that, like there's less fluctuation in terms of the intake and outtake of air and oxygen, CO2. So even things like getting yourself away from mouth breathing into nasal breathing, which is going to steady your sleep patterns, which is going to support that circadian rhythm and give you better, like the REM sleep, the REM sleep. So again, just little tweaks like that can again add to the preventative mix. And you're right there, like there used to be a saying in sports around, like, you know, a good diet is not going to make you a better player, but a bad diet is definitely going to make you a worse player. So that's a kind of like an interesting way to think about it. If you do these preventative things, sometimes you don't notice them in the moment, but you'll be 6 months down the line and you'll look back and go, God, I haven't had a flare in a while. And that's when you get to those moments, that's the magic. That's really like, okay, I'm really on top of this at the moment. But yeah, just to finish, sauna is not a cure, but it can be a powerful tool, helps reduce symptoms, regulate your nervous system. It can promote agency, routine, structure, and it's generally accessible now. I know you have to pay for it, and there's also, it doesn't have to be a sauna. There's sauna blankets. There's loads of different heat tools that you can use as well. So there's a multitude of ways that you can do that. Hopefully don't have to cost you too much, you know.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much. And I will say that I have one of the Nimbus sauna blankets. And I've been fighting viruses this year, bugs and things. And I did stick myself into that as much as possible. And you know, I think there is this element of not sweating it out, but I could feel, again, it was really getting into the root and trying to get rid of the toxins. And I think it's really, all of this is kind of, I always say, be the CEO of your own body. You know, you choose the tools, like you choose the pace, the path, and whatever works for you. And I think we've been conditioned in a way to just accept being told by doctors, take this or take that, or, you know, no, there's nothing wrong with you. No, you own your body and you trust it and you know what is right for you. I just want to quickly jump to some of the questions. And there's one here for you, Kylie. Well, actually, there are two. What is the best diet, they say diet, for PCOS and endo? Dealing with my PCOS and endo, would you recommend?
PCOS, it's going to be fairly similar, but PCOS and like blood sugar dysregulation and high insulin, there's a really big relationship with all of those things. So working with regulating your blood sugar is probably going to be the most powerful tool. So that is, like we said, protein with each meal, especially starting in the morning. We don't want to be, you know, especially for women, if you're in those periods, if you're a really busy woman, you know, a lot of people are talking about fasting now, and I think it probably has a place. But if you are a stressed out woman, it's just another stressor on the body. So if you're dealing with chronic illness, you know, I think what we need to look at is just, you know, getting back to those foundations that we were talking about and making sure that your blood sugar is not crashing. I mean, there are some great tools that you can use, like there's continuous glucose monitors that you can wear for 14 days, where it actually will show you how your food, stress, and sleep actually impact, and exercise impacts the way that your body responds to food and, you know, blood sugar if you're eating like carbohydrates, that kind of thing. But if you don't want to, you know, dive that deep into it, it really is about regulating your blood sugar. And that is going to be, and I think for people, like getting really honest with what they're actually eating, like, you know, when I ask people, well, what are you eating? And, you know, it's very hard to recall what you're eating. Sometimes you don't want to be honest with yourself, but really looking at, you know, in particular, like the carbohydrates, and not to make carbs like the bad guy, because they're absolutely not. But I think just as a society, we're just eating way too many. And, you know, so there's little tracking things that you can, you know, free apps that you can use where you just look at, okay, well, how much am I actually consuming? Like what might be happening to my blood sugar? But PCOS and endo, blood sugar regulation, really, really important.
Yeah,
Making
love
sure
that.
those right ratios of, you know, protein, carbs, and healthy fats to make, you know, to make your life easier. There's some really beautiful nutrients as well for PCOS that there's a lot of research around too, but obviously I won't dive too deep into that. But there's a lot you can do with diet and lifestyle for PCOS.
Yeah.
We
I
think
love that. I know. I will take I'll take this question. Is surgery the last step? There are actually two here. One, do you recommend any treatments? And then, is surgery the last step? So they kind of tie into both. I would say it is, surgery is not necessarily the last step, but it is really it's so important to have an endometriosis specialist. And we hear too many stories in the Frendo community about, going to a general surgeon or someone who's claiming they are an endo specialist, and they have ablation over excision, and they have pretty much, then they come out with, potentially even worse symptoms. So surgery can be really, really successful, but I would suggest that you do your research, talk to communities like ourselves or others, advocates, other patients, always ask. Feel free to ask your surgeon, can you put me in touch with other patients that you've treated? But if you go to the correct surgeon, then it can alleviate a lot of symptoms. And then in terms of recommend any treatments for endometriosis, I mean, I think, a lot of doctors will recommend hormonal treatments. And whilst they work for a lot of people, I feel, unfortunately, that is a little bit of a band-aid approach. And I think there is a problem out there with young girls, young women being put on the pill, being, and to really just suppress. I mean, basically what happens is, if you're on the pill, it doesn't actually stop endometriosis. It's just suppressing the symptoms. So the growth of the disease can continue to happen. And that's where the crucial point is, because the progression rate of the disease over years is actually what causes organ damage. It causes fertility issues. So getting it early. And so if you know that there's something going on, I just always urge you to push for the right treatment that works for you and deal with it. And that's why surgery can actually be a really good thing, because if you're getting as much of the disease as possible, and then following that with all these incredible things that we've spoken about today, I think you're more in control of your health in that way. There is another question is, well, I've kind of covered that. Does the pill help? Any other questions from there? How does it affect pregnancy? I mean, the stats are that, 50% of people with endometriosis will suffer from infertility. I don't really like talking like that. I have a baby. She was a miracle baby, and it's a great thing. I was told all of my life I wouldn't have children, and I do. And many, many, many people have successful pregnancies with endometriosis. I feel like I keep going back to the same point, which is, empowering yourself through your own body from the start. If either of you want to jump in on that,
Yeah,
or
well,
anything
I'm
else.
just going to ask, like, because PCOS is another thing that I'm familiar with as well with my own partner. And, I often hear that, if you go to mainstream doctors, they're just told, yeah, go on the pill, that'll fix it. And that's the kind of go-to knee-jerk response. So I was going to even ask a follow-up question myself around, like, where are we societal-wise in terms of you're a woman out there who, isn't too familiar with what the next step is? Like, is there a clear pathway for women to deal with this? And even if you do reach out, which is, can be similar to mental health and things like that, you finally reach out and then you get a bad person or someone who gives you that kind of knee-jerk, then what? Then you maybe get disheartened, or you put your trust in that person. Like, is the system at a place of, is it supporting adequately at the moment? Or, is it still a bit of a minefield?
I
I
think it's a
know.
minefield. Yeah. Sorry, Kylie. Yeah. I think it can be a minefield for a lot of people. But what I will say is, just find that person, even if it's one, find that person who you trust. And that can be a nurse, it can be one of you guys, it can be me. We always say, DM us, send us an email to hello@Frendo. If you're struggling, frendo.co.uk, if you're struggling and you feel like you're up against a brick wall, you're not, and you're not alone. It's pretty safe to say that, you know, most of us have been there. And yeah, I think we're getting there because of all this, the wider stakeholders like us who are now involved. But it's still really hard for people. But what I'll say is just keep pushing.
Yeah, I was just going to add as well, in Australia, we actually now have endometriosis clinics. So these clinics are designated places for women to go. And these women, a lot of we actually, there's only 22 in Australia. We actually have one in our small rural community, which is quite amazing. But these GPs, a lot of them are, and in my area, they're all women. And they are highly trained in, you know, being able to help diagnose with endometriosis. So I know I have a number of clients with, you know, teenagers and daughters in their early 20s that they're getting really quick diagnoses right now, which is interesting because other women, you know, the average, what's the statistic, 7 to 10 years, something like that for a diagnosis. But I think that, yeah, I think what Dearbhail was pointing out, what she'd mentioned earlier was, you know, you live in your body 24/7. And I see women all the time, they're told, you know, certain things by different GPs or what have you. And if it doesn't sit right with you, I think we need to get back in tune with our own intuition, you know, and a general practitioner, they are a general practitioner. So, you know, it's not necessarily specific. They may not have training or upskill in, you know, particular women's health when it comes to women's health conditions. So I think, yeah, if you don't get the answer you want, whatever they're telling you doesn't feel right, get a second opinion and do exactly what Joel said. Ask your community, ask your girlfriends, you know, ask around, because there are a lot of people that are highly trained and highly skilled. And you just have to find your people and create your network. So that is your general practitioner, your specialist, your women's health physio, your nutritionist, your naturopath, your sauna place, like whatever that might be, you find a team. There's going to be so many different, you know, practitioners that can help look at you from a holistic perspective. But yeah, I think
So
trusting your gut and your intuition as well. It's so big.
it's so true. And like, just to add to that, like, if you think about your body is the greatest tool we'll ever have in our whole lifetime. And if you think like your car, like you wouldn't put shitty fuel into your car, right? You know, because it wouldn't work properly. So, and the second opinion is a great thing. Even with my own skin conditions, my autoimmune stuff, I remember I went to one specialist at Dermo years and years ago, and didn't say anything about gluten intolerance or celiac. Went out to another person because I was like, I wasn't happy with like the result I got or the prognosis. And the next doctor said, you're not celiac, but you're right on the cusp of being. So you are gluten intolerant. And how have you not been told this before? And I said, well, like, I don't know, you know, I'm not the specialist. So, you know, you don't have to be a celiac, but you're still right on the thing where gluten is not good for me. And it took, a second opinion for me to figure that out, you know? So, and like, I've had people before, even from a mental health perspective, say, oh, I've gone and done the psychology thing. And, you know, they were terrible. And my answer to that always is, well, if you go to a restaurant and have a bad meal, does that mean you're going to stop eating? No, you know?
Yeah.
That's right. What what's the opinion, you know, like whatever, like just really tune into yourself and just keep advocating for yourself.
There's another, just one tiny bit on the cellular stuff. And there's a lot of research now coming out about mindset. And I'm not woo-woo at all. Like, I don't really like, you know, the whole spiritual stuff. It's not really my thing. However, there's loads of research now about genetics, DNA, cellular. If you present positive attitude in terms of like, I can do this, I'm going to get on top of this and stuff, it actually then reforms your DNA and helps prevent even further things down the line. So that kind of positive mindset of like, I can tackle this, I can achieve this, actually does imprint in your own DNA, which can then help your own overall situation, you know?
I think that's a really nice way to finish. We've just gone just over the hour, but I think what we've talked about today is it's really bigger. It's part of a bigger mindset shift in a way, and that we don't have to accept feeling unwell. You know, that's not the norm. And yeah, and I think endo, you know, is super complex. Like, but there are tools to support in those really difficult times. So thank you guys so much. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for inviting me to be part. Neil, you're brilliant. There's a nice message there. You are an ally, and I think it's really important to have men part of this conversation. I think it's hugely important. And Kylie, I think we could do another, 4 sessions with you. So well, hopefully see you guys at the next one. Thank you.
Thanks, team. See you. Good night.
Bye.